Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. I'm still on the topic of emotional intelligence and resilience, which I'm actually going to be spending quite a bit of time on just because there is so much to talk about. It's really the foundation for everything else that we're going to build upon for the coming year. So last week, I talked about the ability model of emotional intelligence and some of the key skills. If you're looking for a really structured approach to enhance this emotional intelligence, Ruler, the acronym Ruler, is an excellent tool that really translates that ability model into actionable steps. So it systematically teaches those, five key emotional intelligence skills. So specifically, recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions. So everything that I talked about, those foundational skills, it's kind of breaking that down into each of those steps. So again, once adults have strong emotional intelligence, that's what I was focusing on last week. We need to build the skills ourselves. Now we can start teaching kids when we have developed, and I know in 1 week you haven't developed it. It's going to be a continuous journey. Even I am working on this. It's not an area that we're going to be completely competent in because there's always going to be new situations, right? We're always growing that muscle. It's just like a muscle. Once we build it, doesn't mean we never have to work on it again. Anyways, all this to say, we are focusing today on self-awareness, teaching kids to start understanding their emotions. That self-awareness really is the foundation of emotional intelligence. When kids can recognize and name their feelings, they're better equipped to regulate their emotions. They can make thoughtful decisions. They connect with other people. So I want to start off with the self-awareness. We really need language. This is so crucial for emotional intelligence. Now, you've probably heard somebody say, I'm stressed or I'm feeling really anxious, but these are really often mislabeled. And oftentimes it's missing the underlying root emotion of what's actually going on, or I'm so angry, right? Usually there's something else. But when we're mislabeling those emotions, it really holds us back from being able to manage them effectively. And so that's why we want to have a really solid emotional vocabulary because that's really going to change how we and kids regulate their feelings, right? Naming them accurately is the first step to emotional growth. It's the simplest way to get to emotion regulation. And so that's really important. Now, when we look at language, language shapes our experiences. Developing a strong emotional vocabulary, it's like giving kids a map to navigate their internal world. When kids can accurately label their emotions, it actually is changing their brain, right? It's switching on their prefrontal cortex to help reduce that frustration. They're able to process the experience and situation more effectively, and in turn, they can manage their emotions. If we don't have the language to describe our feelings, it's really hard to manage them without the right words. Those emotions can become so overwhelming and it can lead to the emotional outbursts that we see, or the withdrawal, or miscommunication. I see this even with adults. I'm sure you have, right? They can't express their feelings, and so they engage in these angry outbursts. In my experience, traffic is one where it brings out a lot of negative things out of people. Anyways, looking at this. So emotional literacy really starts with vocabulary. When we can label our emotions, we activate that prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps with the rational thinking and problem solving and self-regulation. It dampens the intensity of whatever emotion we're experiencing. It makes it easier to manage it. Okay, so I've talked a lot about if we can name it, we can tame it. Mr. Rogers, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So the bottom line here is that the more precise we are able to describe our feelings, the better we can understand, manage, and communicate those. So kids with strong emotional vocabulary, they're more likely to experience fewer behavioral problems. They can usually demonstrate more empathy. They can succeed academically, right? In all of these different areas. They can express their needs clearly. They can work through conflicts more constructively. They have healthier relationships. So we just see how language helps support. Now, if they only know a handful of words like happy, sad, angry, I mean, for younger kids, that's okay. That's where we're going to start. But as they get older, if they still only have those basic few, and just so you know, our brain only can come up with a couple of those things anyways, right? And if they don't have the vocabulary, they're missing out on a huge range of different subtle emotions that actually exist between some of those extremes. And this is really important because identifying the emotion is going to help us figure out what the right strategy is. Different emotions require different strategies, right? Overwhelm is going to need something different than pressure or test anxiety, right? Actually, I just remember hearing Dr. Mark Brackett, he actually developed the ruler. So he's from Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and he talks about surveying his students about how they felt. And overwhelmingly, the answer was stressed. All of his students pretty much felt stressed. That was the big emotion. But stress isn't an emotion. When he dug deeper, because he's like, okay, that's not the emotion. So what is the emotion? The emotion that they were actually feeling was envy. It's interesting. I talked after I heard, him talking about this envy. I went and talked to my daughter who's in university, and she vehemently agreed. She's like, that totally makes sense. All of our friends, she's like, I never would have thought of it as envy. But she agreed. All of our friends are stressed out, especially ones who are in going into medicine or engineering. And what they talk about constantly is about how everyone else is doing so much better than them and how everybody else is getting scholarships and how everybody else can go away for the weekend because they're doing better in school and yada yada yada, right? We live in this digital world where social comparison is so much more rampant. Like certainly there is that in everyday experiences if we expect, the people around us are doing better, but it's even just blown up even more in every area of life, right? So like, based on looks and friendships and everything, they have the social comparison all the time. So we see that stress, it's just a surface level label when really there's these deeper feelings of maybe inadequacy. And this is really important because if we're just saying, I'm stressed, which isn't an emotion, anyways, but if we're just saying that, we're taking it at face value, and then we're trying to reduce stress by practicing mindfulness or deep breathing or relaxation, but the real emotion they're experiencing is envy, well, it's not going to help very much. No breathing is going to help with the envy, right? That's not going to get to those deeper feelings. So if you have a child who doesn't make the hockey team, they might feel disappointment, right? Because they were really liking their friend was made that team. There's just this disappointment. Maybe there's sadness, but maybe what they show is anger because maybe their little brother makes Div 1 and now he's being teased about it. So disappointment, there's this unmet expectation, maybe there's sadness and or feeling left out. So there could be these underlying feelings and probably of things of like inadequacy as well. But if we focus on the anger or the behavior that comes out, I mean, that's from a perceived injustice. That's something completely different. Very different emotional experiences, but we often mislabel them. And if we see anger as the adult, we're going to respond very differently to that child. We're going to tell them to calm down. It's not a big deal. Get your act together. Don't be angry, right? And we're going to respond differently if we knew that they were actually disappointed. So if they're just saying something broadly like, I'm mad, how can we encourage them to identify, right? Looking at, is it disappointment? Is it irritated? Is it resentful? Each of those emotions signals something different. And so we want to get as specific as possible. That specificity makes regulation so much easier. Now, we tend to lump all of these emotions together under stress or sadness, right? But like I said, that mislabeling is just going to lead to really ineffective coping strategies. So if we apply the ruler approach, we can really model these things. So, if we've got a kiddo who's angry in front of us because maybe another child took their toy, we want to recognize that's the R. I see you're really upset. We want to understand, is it because, you feel like your space wasn't respected, right? We want to be, um, what's the word? Not with certainty, right? We want to be hesitant. We want to be questioning. I don't know exactly, so I'm just probing. What is it? So that they can correct us. Hearing the words and being able to process it themselves is going to help them build the skills. Maybe we're helping label. Sounds like you might be feeling really frustrated, maybe a little hurt, right? Again, we want to be hesitant and tentative. That's the word I was looking for. Tentative about this so that they can process and come up with it and correct us. Sometimes that's easier, correcting us versus coming up on their own with it. We want to express. That's the E of ruler. It's okay to feel this way. Let's find a way to talk about it calmly. And then the last skill, of course, is regulate. What do you need right now? Right? Is it maybe like, do you think a reset break would be helpful before going and talking to your classmate or your sister, right? Or whoever the other kid is. So over time, we're modeling it, we're guiding them. That approach is going to help build stronger emotion regulation skills in kids and in ourselves too. And again, we got to be good role models, right? So our practicing ourselves with our own emotions. So the next time you feel stressed, take that pause and ask, what's beneath this? Is it overwhelm from too much on my plate? Is it anxiety because I don't know what my boss is going to say when I go into his office on Monday? Is it frustration because I didn't get everything done today that I had wanted to do? Right? So looking at that root emotion, that's half the battle. We got to dig deeper and we got to show our kids we're doing that work as well, right? If we want them to start labeling their emotions very accurately, as accurately as possible, I've actually created a little worksheet. So check it out in the show notes to help kids differentiate between those subtle emotions, just to foster better emotional awareness and regulation. So eventually, really, we want the goal for right now just to be naming emotions in real time as much as possible. Okay, we can build on this, we will build on this, and other skills will come. But connecting emotions to our experiences in the moment really reinforces this understanding and normalizing, being able to talk about our feelings as well. And eventually they can start to see their patterns of, what is getting them upset, what are things that are bringing them contentment and joy, right? And so there's going to start developing greater self-awareness. So it's not just about identifying emotions, but it's recognizing those patterns and what is energizing them, what's draining them, who is energizing them, who is draining them, what are my, where I am, what I'm doing, all of those different factors that influence our mood. Those small insights is going to allow them to make better decisions, better behavioral choices, and it's going to just improve their overall well-being. And as adults, we can see these patterns for kids too, so we can be better proactive co-regulators. So that's really important. Now, if we want kids to be able to recognize and label their emotions, right? They need to feel safe to do so. So, a key to emotional growth, and especially for kids, is that non-judgmental, open communication where kids feel safe enough to unpack their feelings. And that's why normalizing talking about our feelings all the time is so important. And so that's why I spend so much time on the relationship piece too. Definitely review past episodes where I talk about effective communication because that relationship is so important to help kids unpack about, what's going on for them and for us to validate their experience. At the end of the day, that's what we need to do. Even if you don't go back to previous episodes, we need to validate their experience, no matter how ridiculous or small of a deal we think that it is. Kids need permission to feel all of their feelings and to share all of those feelings. Suppressing those emotions can lead to really long-term distress and a lot of mental health issues. So relationship building is the priority here. So we can create that safe space for that emotional expression, which is also going to help reduce, any misinterpretations of behavior. Without that, we can't teach kids anything. Connection and empathy are the foundation of that trust and engagement in expressing ourselves. Kids respond to how we make them feel. So we need to make sure that they trust us and feel safe and open with us, right? So don't jump to conclusions. If a kiddo's acting out, jumping to conclusions is not going to be a helpful response and it's going to shut down any future communication. Instead, we got to get curious, right? Get curious instead of furious. We got to ask them about what happened, what's going on, validate their experience. And if they say, I don't know, oh man, I can see you're upset, right? We just want to make sure we're validating what we think from their perspective. So it's creating that emotionally supportive environment to help kids build skills. And so the first skill again is accurately identifying how they're feeling, that emotional identification for better long-term emotional intelligence. So the homework so far, it's been a lot, is to reflect on your own emotional patterns, engage in open, honest conversations about feelings, and helping kids expand their emotional vocabulary too. In the moment, understand and validate their experience. You can't help them if you don't understand where they're at. And if they're not too dysregulated, you can ask reflective, open-ended questions. The worst thing you can do is tell them what to do, even if you're trying to be helpful. No one likes to be told what to do, to be told to calm down or to just breathe, even adults. You don't tell me to calm down, right? Open-ended question shifts the brain. They're able to keep that prefrontal cortex online, which is the key for self-regulation, right? So maybe even just asking, what is it that you need right now? I can see you're upset. What do you need right now? I don't know what I need. Okay, I'm just going to be over here. You let me know. I'll be in the kitchen or I'll be at my desk. You just come let me know when you're ready, what you need from me, right? Or questions maybe you're asking that can help reframe the situation. We're not forcing a solution on them, but maybe we're helping them shift this. How do you think you'll feel about this tomorrow, for example? But we want to integrate activities into daily routines as well. So with young kids, you could reflect on stories, right? So after reading a story, asking things like, how do you think this character felt? Maybe find it in the emotion, on an emotion meter. Where do you think they would fall on this? You could do emotional storytelling, asking kids to recount the times that they felt different emotions. Tell me about a time you felt brave. What happened? Sharing those stories really helps normalize emotions and it builds confidence in managing them. You could do things like emotion charades. I mean, that's a fun way to really embody emotions and expand their vocabulary at the same time. You could do things like emotion bingo, having different slots with different emotions and ask kids um, about experiences they've had or maybe experiences that come up every time something happens, a situation that comes up and they recognize an emotion in themselves or an emotion in others. They can mark it off on their bingo sheet. And the first to get a bingo, right, they can share stories, and now they're the winner of these things. You can use characters from Inside Out. I love Inside Out, right? Maybe they're creating their own characters, and we can chat about what different characters feel like, and what based on how you're feeling today, what character can you relate to right now and use that as a jumping off point for deeper conversations. But no matter what age, consistently practicing emotional check-ins, start in the morning, having those morning check-ins or some sort of emotional forecast and reflecting, that's really important for building their skills. Right. And as a bonus, these check ins are really great connection opportunities as well. So start the day with a morning check in. With younger kids, you could have a mood meter poster. You could use emojis. You could use colors. I'll be talking about colors in just a second. Simple emotion words. I remember when my girls were young, we had this big magnetic board with like 100 different feelings, and they had a little magnet that they could put, even though they couldn't read and didn't have the words, they could use like the little emoticons and put their magnet. This is how I'm feeling today. And then we could talk about that. Oh, wow, you're feeling exhilarated. Let's talk about that. And sometimes they would shift. Oh, no, no, no. Exhilaration wasn't actually what I was feeling. I talked about Dr. Brackett. He has also done other things too. So he developed the ruler, but he also created this mood grid based on his research. And so it's the mood meter and it's divided into four quadrants. Usually when I think of mood meter, I'm thinking of like a thermometer from like over the top to calm and relaxed. But he's got this grid, and there's four quadrants. So pleasant and unpleasant emotions are along the x-axis. So we never want to label them good or bad, positive or negative. We all need all emotions, and we want to normalize all of those emotions. But we might experience them as pleasant or unpleasant. So that's the x-axis. And then along the y-axis, that's our low to high energy, right? So we can start looking at. So now we've got four quadrants. So yellow is high energy, high pleasantness, so excited and joyful. We then have green, which would be low energy, high pleasantness. So we would be calm, we would be content. Blue would be low energy, low pleasantness, so sad and tired. So the bottom left quadrant. My camera might be flipped, so I'm not sure exactly where. Um, if my hands are looking the opposite way, but bottom left quadrant, and then the top left quadrant is red. That's the high energy, low pleasantness. So angry, anxiety. Again, I'll put an example of that in the show notes, along with a list of emotions, the purpose of those emotions, and maybe an idea just to get the juices flowing, different ideas of what you might need depending on, a certain feeling that you might be experiencing. Kids as young as 3 can really use that grid with those different colors. So it's never too early. And I know even from 18 months old, my daughter, I was able to teach, I'm fustated. Fustated was what, the broad, overarching, unpleasant feeling was. And as she got older, we were able to fine tune it. With the colors, I will say I don't love red because I think that kids associate that with bad all the time. So, just something to watch out for. And it's not about good and bad. I want to make sure we're embracing all of those emotions. We're not avoiding them ever. So, even being in red or being in blue, it's not bad. It just means there's certain different strategies that we're going to need to use to work through it than if we're in the yellow, right? Or I mean, green, we probably don't have a lot of strategies other than to keep it going, but there's strategies that we need to work on depending on how we're feeling. And that's the way we need to look at it. Oh, if I'm in the red zone, cool. These are some things that are going to help. If I'm in the green zone, these are some things that I'm going to be able to keep that good stuff going. But it's really getting kids to plot themselves on this grid. So it could be a magnet, it could be a sticky note, it's just something that they can label their emotional state. It could be a journal, it could be an app. Making a habit out of it is what the key is, right? It's going to build that foundation of self-awareness every day. So we do our morning check-in. Having a midday emotion check-in, like at lunch or snack, it's another good time just to assess how kids are feeling and how it's changed, right? How are you feeling compared to earlier? How do you predict you're going to feel compared to now, right? And then at the end of the day, we're going to reflect about what was the challenging part of the day? What was their favorite part of the day? We want to put in some gratitude there. How did you feel? What are, any shifts in how you were feeling through the day? And identifying their pattern at the end of the week, maybe the end of the day, the end of the week. Which quadrant did they find themselves in the most? And how is that affecting learning? How is that affecting friendships? That regular practice, it's really helping kids build awareness of what's going on and aware of their emotional shifts throughout the day. Things change, things shift. In the moment, big feelings like anxiety want us to feel like this is never going to change. I am always going to feel like this. So when they can actually see through their own experience, things do shift and change, right? It's going to be a little bit easier. In high school, journaling can be really helpful, focusing on how those emotions shape their focus, shape their behavior. You could use current events or social issues just to spark some conversation about how emotions play a role. You could get them to set goals around their emotional states, right? So asking things like, what emotional state will help you perform your best on this project or studying for this test? How can you keep your emotions to stay on track? Make sure you're regulating your emotions. So we can actually start proactively working on some of that emotion regulation, right? So encouraging emotion regulation before tests, ask them to reflect on their mood meter color and what is it that if they're in blue or if they're in red, that's probably not optimal learning, right? So what do you need to optimize your test performance? What quadrant do you need to be in and how do you get there? So it's not just about labeling. That's the first step on the ladder, and that's why we're focusing on it. But there are skills that we need to add on. So what's next? What do you need to do next? But anyways, I think that that's important. Another one I actually love is jars. I love jars for so many different things, but emotion jars where kids can fill the jars with different colored, it could be marbles or pom-poms or whatever it is, representing their emotions throughout the week. And then at the end of the week, now we've got this visual and we can talk about the patterns. Wow, I noticed a lot of green marbles in here. What helped you feel peaceful and calm through the week? What do you think these little red things were? What contributed to those? And what helped you get back to the green? As a kid, I mean, we a lot of my friends had mood rings. That was a big thing. And I think that they're coming back a little bit, but that was really cool to see because I would actually, and I remember friends being like, wow, I'm feeling really stressed out right now. I'm really angry. This is what I'm going to do. It brought them back into the moment where they're at and what is it that I need to do next. So, the point of naming all the emotions, yes, we're increasing that emotional vocabulary. That's building the self awareness proactively. And that's going to later help with regulation, but they need to have the skill to be able to regulate their emotions. Okay, so that's really important. And being able to see those patterns over time and see that they shift and change and they're not permanent, that's important as well. Now, it's not a one-time lesson. They're not going to do it for one day. It's got to be incorporated into everyday life. Okay, so that's important too. You could also do practical things focusing on specific emotions too. So maybe you're noticing a lot of resentment. I actually see, a lot of this in the classroom, but definitely at home between siblings, right? A lot of resentment. And so maybe we're going to work on this emotion. And so maybe with resentment, you're going to have a fairness circle where you're going to have discussions where you teach about fairness and giving space to be able to express feelings. Or maybe regret. I see a lot of regret, right? So, what I would do next time, why I made these choices, and what I can do differently or what I can do to fix it, right? So, a lot of reflection just to build that growth mindset and some self compassion too. Nostalgia, right, from Inside Out. That was a new one that crept in there, but I love that emotion too. Maybe we're creating memory boxes with photos or different mementos, right? Just to encourage some gratitude and connection. So we could do things for positive emotions too. Maybe you see ambivalence, right? So maybe they're working on the pros and cons to help with decision making and maybe some emotional acceptance. Vindication, being able to acknowledge accomplishments through pride jars, right? We're just looking at that pride and validation. Maybe we're going on nature walks and stargazing. There's lots of different things that we could be doing. So, so looking at if you see someone struggling, a kiddo struggling with a certain emotion, there's so many things that you can do. It's just a matter of being very proactive. It's getting in a lot of reps. Again, we're building this muscle. So it's a lot of reps every day, all the time that we're going to practice and build these skills so that it becomes easier when big emotions do come in and they're expected to regulate their emotion. But we're still at that bottom rung. So we need kids to recognize, express, and to manage those feelings eventually in helpful ways, right? Not suppress. We often want to suppress emotions, and it's very unlikely that people would actually admit, I'm feeling really jealous and envious right now because it feels wrong. It feels like we're a bad person. But if we're suppressing it, it's not going to make it disappear, right? That's why we need to be aware and we need to acknowledge it. When we name it, we tame it. It takes away its power, right? I think that's really important. And not only that, we need to be able to sit with those feelings. Don't try to make them feel better. They need to regulate their emotions. And to be able to regulate their emotions, they need to get comfortable sitting in that discomfort. Because right now, when they're uncomfortable, we push it away. We're going to go binge watch. We're going to go you go on our screens, right? We're going to drink. A lot of my teens will go and smoke some marijuana. So they need to get comfortable with that discomfort. Lots to think about today. Definitely check out those show notes, but we're looking for lots of opportunities to be able to identify as specifically as possible how we're feeling. I will get into a little bit more about breaking it down because for some kids that might be tricky. And so it might just be looking at what quadrant I'm in, and then we're going to get into more specifics there. So I'll leave it there for today, but just help kids collect data because that's what emotions are. It's data, right? So the more they can learn to unpack those emotions, then they're going to be able to reframe them and take control. So like I said, I'll continue the emotional intelligence next week, and eventually we are focusing on self-regulation, how to help kids manage their emotions once they've actually identified them. But again, there's still more work to do. It's really about normalizing, talking about our feelings in the first place, practicing identifying all of those emotions. So do as much practicing as you can, and of course, modeling that. Until then, Keep nurturing those emotional awareness skills. Help those kiddos be bold and courageous. And I will see you next week.